everyone. Thank you and welcome to this June 2022 Elder Justice Lunch and Learn. This is a bit of a special edition in that we are not coming to you live today. We felt it was so important to pull these speakers together. We wanted to ensure that we were able to get all of them in one place. And so I hope this is useful to you and informs some of your work over the coming year. Today, we are going to be talking about the movement, and particularly here in California, our efforts to create an elder justice, and I may say this incorrectly, an elder justice and adults with disabilities coordinating council. We are seeking to look at all of the different ways that the justice and particularly the system impacts older adults and adults with disabilities. And we want to come together and create coordinated efforts. And so today we are joined by two distinguished panelists. We have Blanca Castro. She is the state long-term care ombudsman from the state of California. She comes to us with a long history of working with on behalf of older adults and most recently with AARP. We are also joined by Lisa Coleman, who is the legislative director for California Commission on Aging. Prior to that, Lisa was the executive director of the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Association. And so both of these ladies have worked around the field of elder justice and serve on the coordinating council. Unfortunately, we were going to have Marty Emoto with us today from California Disability Action Network, and he was unable to join us. And unfortunately, that means that some of the questions we had created, we will not be able to dive into. And I want to say I'm sorry about that, because we do believe that the section that is dedicated to adults with disabilities is important. And while connected, it is distinct. And so we recognize that we won't be able to fully represent that perspective today. So ladies, I want to thank you for joining us and taking the time to come together to help our community understand kind of this amorphous and still evolving concept. So welcome.
Thank you, Nicole.
Nice to be here.
Wonderful. I also want to remind everyone that we do have ASL interpretation. So please be sure to avail yourself and share this, this video with folks who may enjoy it and be able to access it because of this resource provided by California Department of Social Services. So we're going to start out today, and Blanca, you are going to be first on deck with our questions. And I just want to remind everyone, we are a casual group here, so this really is a conversation among friends and colleagues. So if you feel like there's more information to add, feel free to do so. But Blanca, why don't you start off by telling us kind of what is the Elder Justice Coordinating Council?
Well, first of all, thank you, Nicole, for inviting me. As the state long-term care ombudsman, I get to be a member of the California Elder and Disability Justice Coordinating Council. And that's actually one of the key unique changes in the California Elder Justice Coordinating Council, because at the federal level, they do have the same level of coordinating council, but here in California, we recognize, as you mentioned, that adults with disabilities are also part of this very important work that we're doing. Back in 2021, when Governor Newsom issued his executive order and released the Master Plan on Aging, one of the over 100 initiatives, but one of the key initiatives is number 93. And remember that number, because that specifically had asked and directed the California Health and Human Services Agency to create the California Elder and Disability Justice Coordinating Council. The purpose of this council is to increase coordination, as it says, and we are tasked with not only diving into what are the fragmentations, what are the divisions, or basically what are the silos that we have been working under in a number of different agencies, and not as a criticism, but simply as agencies do the work in elder justice, and then trying to really come up with very specific recommendations that we will be then presenting to the legislature on where we can improve coordination at the state and maybe even at the federal, and definitely between state and local programs. What we have today is a system where when there is a report regarding elder or older adult and an adult with disability abuse, neglect, exploitation, depending on which county, which of the 58 counties you live in, it could be very different. There may be one phone number, there may be several different departments. We know that all local counties have multidisciplinary teams, but at the state level, there are various departments, various entities that touch that same incident, that same case. And so how we're working now is really stepping back, looking at the landscape, and determining where can we connect the organizations, what sort of data needs to be shared, what sort of do we need to create new memorandums of understanding, do we need to create new regulations, do we need to pass new policy or legislation? All that is what we're currently grappling with. And I have to tell you, it is a significant effort. Significant effort. And it's not going to happen in 1 year. It's not going to happen in necessarily 2 years where we will have everything figured out. But what we are now doing is we are able to really dive in because of the work that has been done in the past. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Lisa with providing a little more context of this. We've arrived here, but we arrived here very intentionally.
Absolutely, Blanca. This is really fun because part of this is kind of a history, running back in history. I have a slide of what I believe is kind of the basis for where the council came from. Oh, yep, there's our initiative, 93. Yay, we got included in the master plan. But what was included in the master plan, I think, was predated by the blueprint. And that comes courtesy of the California Elder Justice, CEJC, and Lisa Nirenberg and her team. They have been working on this area of elder justice for a long time. As Blanca said, this isn't something new that was just kind of created with the master plan. This blueprint originally was published in 2016. And I'm excited to say that Lisa and her team are in the process of revising it for a new edition. Some of the things that were identified in 2016, we've moved forward on. I think a fair number of the things that are going to be coming out in the new blueprint are really retreads of what we uncovered in 2016. As Blanca said, this takes time, but maybe there's a greater sense of urgency now with the master plan for aging and with this initiative 93 and this coordinating council. We just don't have the luxury of kicking this can down the road anymore. And when we look at our elected officials that are coming on board now, they're going to be in the hot spot come 2030. They won't have termed out. They will be responsible for the extent that we have gotten ourselves prepared for this big change and growth in the older adult population and the potential expansion of elder abuse to both older adults and adults with disabilities. So I had the question of, the origin. And so, yes, the blueprint is a big part of that origin. And the work of Lisa Nirenberg as framed in the master plan for aging.
Lisa, can you go back just a second? Because I just realized, you and I have served on the CEJ steering committee, but maybe all of our friends out there don't know what it is. So can you just take a minute to talk about the CEJC and what that is? Because I think that's a really foundational piece in this understanding.
I guess I do kind of skip over that, huh? And they really do need to get a lot of credit. I mean, Lisa's been working hard. Lisa Nirenberg has been working hard at this. And Carol Sewell, my predecessor at the Commission on Aging, ha- it all of this work has those two women's handprints all over it. So the CEAGC steering committee was a very specific and intentional that we need to be looking at how do we elevate this conversation of elder justice and what does it mean, and restorative justice, because it's not just enough that something bad has happened to an individual. What do we do moving forward? What resources are there for the individual, and also what changes have to be put in place to prevent this from happening again? And, you know, that is a really big part of this whole coordinating council. You know, I have somewhere in my notes about it's not just identifying it, it's putting in place things that prevent it and restore. So I don't know if that answers your question, Nicole.
Well, maybe
we
it's
are
about
also on that.
and saying so CEJC stands for California Elder Justice Coalition, and these are folks, I think they came together, was it 10 years ago? And they basically said, hey, they were sort of starting this conversation. We've got some disparate systems, and they just sort of really embodied the belief of starting working where you are. And they just started having conversations. And due to the women you've mentioned, Carol Sewell and Lisa Nuremberg, they really started a fire in California, and I think are responsible for this conversation. So I just wanted to make sure folks understand. So maybe go back and talk about the blueprint as you were. I apologize.
Yeah, no, I think you've just kind of summed it all up. The blueprint was their effort to identify where we are, what resources we have today, and what steps should we be taking, both you know, legislative changes, operational changes, to change to make it better for individuals moving forward. And as we look at the master plan for aging, I think that's the origin story for this council.
And I think, if I may, because a lot of this work predates the master plan on aging for sure, but there were already the Elder Justice Coalition was already looking at specific action steps, some of which we may have already implemented. For example, there was, and there today in the Elder Justice and Disability Coordinating Council, we need to ensure that the justice system is also part of this, because the final outcome or the final penalties, those and actions that are taken against the perpetrators, those are very important, and you want to make sure that the justice system is part of the solution. So there were very specific recommendations on everything from, not only do want to promote the coordination and collaboration among the justice system, but also among legal professions. We wanted to be able to promote, how do the elder protection courts, how are they handling all of the criminal, domestic violence, consumer, and family law cases today, and how would this align with it? But then we also, at the time, and we're still looking at it, is developing a statewide database of civil and criminal cases to increase understanding of the legal case outcomes and facilitate sharing that knowledge. I'd like to talk about some of the changes that we do know have happened in California as the result of raising this awareness. For example, now financial institutions are one of the mandated reporters. So oftentimes, for example, in long-term care facilities, if there is a financial financial abuse, and it could very well be a family member or not, sometimes the complainant is actually coming from a financial institution because they have noticed a change in how much money is being withdrawn from an account. So there are some things that have changed, but we have to now go even further so that when we do have, for example, a situation where there was a perpetrator in a long-term care facility or any other of our service providers within the Older Americans Act programs, that we're recognizing this individual or making sure this individual never comes in contact with an older adult or an adult with a disability, just like we do today with children and protecting them when there's been somebody who has abused children.
I want to jump in on that one, Blanca, because I think what that was a part of the council is recognizing the different entities that needed to be at the table for this. Mm-hmm. Because as you were talking about APS and the ombudsman as actual service providers endeavoring to uncover and to restore, to make right for individuals, we also needed to have the state agencies at the table. Mm-hmm. And as you said, law enforcement and the Department of Justice and the compensation board, victims compensation board. So we needed to have all of those entities invited to the table. And I think that's one of the things that makes it so exciting for an advocate like myself to be on this particular council, because we have all of the participants there. So often I'm on councils that are just the advocates, or it's just the providers, or we hear about things that are going on at the state level within state government. But this is a unique opportunity when all of those groups are coming together and saying, what are our strengths? Where do we fumble a little and how might we coordinate? And as you said, memorandums of understanding, because that kind of goes back to what I was saying before. We just don't have the time. I'm going to jump ahead. One of the questions.
Well, I just wonder 1 second, Lisa. Just hold on right there, because I think you're getting into our next question, which is talking about the structure of the coordinating council. And I think that this is where we need to pay a little thanks to the Justice and Aging team. They worked really diligently on this process and were advocating to ensure that there was representation and buy-in from both state agencies, but also equal authority and understanding of the knowledge of the advocates. And so I think that that's where we just need to particularly say thank you to Viviane Mubarak, one of their attorneys, and of course their executive director, Kevin Prindeville. So I just want to take that. And so I'm wondering, Blanca, and we'll get back to Lisa. Yeah. Blanca, can you kind of pick up and talk about, as you are housed within the California Department of Aging, and as is the Commission on Aging. And so can you maybe speak to that as like the structure and how Department of Aging views the coordinating council?
Thank you. That's a perfect question. And it's extremely important how it is organized. So while the Master Plan on Aging was very specific, or the Initiative 93 was very specific on who should be included in terms of the departments. So you certainly have all Health and Human Services departments who touch everyone from older adults and adults with disabilities. But you also have Consumer Affairs that needs to be represented, the California Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. We have the Office of Emergency Services that has a seat, Department of Insurance, Department of Justice. And then we have representatives from the County Welfare Directors Association and Administration for Community Living. But what I'd like to point to is what's very unique and has been part of the important work that we're doing, is that we're also dividing up different work groups, because there are very specific areas that need to be focused on. Before I get to the work groups, though, I want to share that some of the other, the way the membership, they include, you'd mentioned Marty Omoto, who is the California Disability Action Network. We have a representative from the In-Home Support Services Consumer Alliance, the Fresno County Department of Social Services. So we have rural county represented. We also have people, representative from the State Association of Public Administrators, Public Guardians, and Public Conservators. And I'm just going to name a few: the Alzheimer's Association, the California, the the California Elder Justice Coalition, who is Lisa Nuremberg, and University of California, San Francisco. So we have a real variety. We even have a retired representative from the Department of Rehabilitation. So we have historical knowledge, and then we have been very intentional in making sure that we have people who represent. So we have a couple of advocates who represent not only an individual who's an older adult, but also somebody who is a person with a disability, and one more group that it needs to be called out, and that is the Family Voices of California. Okay. So we have a real, lastly, United Domestic Workers. So we have our labor, because they're so critical to not only knowing what's going on, but also providing some very good input into what we can be doing to coordinate. Mm-hmm. And then to my point of the different work groups, we have a work group that is looking specifically at what research is out there, mm-hmm. and really collecting, and that's one of the groups that I get to be on, where we're looking at what is already out there that can inform how we can maybe replicate some best practices, mm-hmm. and not just coordinating the efforts, but where are we duplicating? Mm-hmm. Where are we doing things that are not necessarily going to be efficient? And then where can technology come in? Mm. As well as what kinds of tools, what kinds of assessments can be done at a point where, whether it's at a medical, whether it's the provider or whether it's a family member, but where there are very clear, consistent questions maybe, or checklists where everybody's using sort of the same assessment tool and understanding, mm-hmm. where we identify what the violation or how is this victim mm-hmm. hurt, and then what are the appropriate steps to take? What should we be doing to ensure that this is prevented, mm-hmm. and this is also that justice is served when necessary.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think, Blanca, we're going to have you go just into our next question. And this is where I want to say to our viewers today that we had a section with Marty, and he was unable to join at the last minute. So please know we did not intend to pay short shrift to those who experience disabilities as they age. So Blanca, I think a lot of folks don't really understand how long-term care ombudsmen play into the world of, and support the work of elder abuse prevention and elder justice. So can you maybe tell us, first of all, define what a long-term care ombudsman is, and talk about what is the role in California for long-term care ombudsman?
Well, it's been around for over 40 years in California, the program. Mm-hmm. So the long-term care ombudsman, and for our listeners, the ombudsman is a Swedish term, and it means advocate in short. And the ombudsman's role is specifically very unique. We are advocating on behalf of a resident based on what the resident wants. Mm-hmm. What the resident, and when we talk about residents, we're talking about people who are in long-term care communities, whether that's in a skilled nursing home or whether that's in residential care facilities for the elderly, all of the assisted living, board and care, all of those are under our jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. Our role is when whoever, it's a free service, but anybody can file a complaint. Mm-hmm. And if there is an alleged elder abuse case, if it's in a long-term care facility, the ombudsman is the lead entity. Mm-hmm. We work very closely with a number of entities and organizations that are part of this Elder Justice and Disability Coordinating Council, but we also report across to the regulatory agencies if we need to, so the licensing. and adult protective services. Where it's different with adult protective services, and this is really important, adult protective services is the lead outside of long-term care facilities. So if there is an incident that occurs in somebody's home, or you believe somebody is maybe a victim of financial abuse, potential neglect, self-neglect, that's when adult protective services comes in. So the long-term care ombudsman, what's very different from APS is that we need to get the approval from the resident. And if the resident doesn't have the capability to communicate and they are unable to give us authority, then it's their representative, whether that is their person who's power of attorney, conservator, who would then give us the approval then to report to law enforcement. Now, certainly, if there was something that was very egregious, we would have no choice but to report it to law enforcement. But we don't actually, we will assist with the investigation, but we are not the ones who will then, it will be law enforcement, adult protective services, maybe the Justice Department, maybe other entities that will actually do some of the enforcement or taking action against somebody. But we absolutely are the ones who've developed that trust with the resident. I want to touch on something that is very critical here. It is difficult for an older adult to report sometimes that they've been abused, or that they may have been a victim of fraud, or any one of the other, any other type of abuse or neglect issue. What is important to note is that sometimes there's a feeling of shame, or it could be a family member and they're fearful that that individual would be sent to prosecuted. So we do recognize that that's also part of the reason with this that we're looking at is how do you ensure that you are informing, educating people who may be victims or who may know of someone who is a victim of abuse, that they can trust that the process will be handled the way they want. And that's one thing that the ombudsman is very, very dedicated to. We're directed by the person who is the victim.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I just want to, and again, I don't know the exact number, so please tell me if you do, that sometimes that fact that ombudsmen in general, we do receive the SOC 341s, the concern about abuse. Is that unique to California long-term care ombudsman? Are there other states that have similar systems?
That is absolutely, well, that's one of the unique aspects of California. There are many states that do not, where the long-term care ombudsman does not handle any of the abuse complaints. They will immediately refer to adult protective services. What we are seeing, though, Nicole, is a growing trend where now we need to identify how do you collaborate, because you can't ignore, especially when we're going into facilities, you can't ignore what you are seeing or what you're aware of and only turn it over to another entity. You really do become invested, and quite frankly, this could be something that is happening to other residents. So you really want to make sure, and it's the training and it's the level of comfort, but that is really changing. And what we are seeing with the National Ombudsman Resource Center, they're really starting to explore how do we formalize this relationship with adult protective services and long-term care ombudsman, because they are they really do have a way of supporting one another's role and reducing
Mm-hmm.
those divisions that oftentimes what it's doing, it's making it harder for that individual to even report or the complainant to even report what's going on because they don't know where to begin.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great summary of the sort of the mixing. Sometimes we have to, the sort of muddy areas that we have to wade through and in really trying to support the resident.
Absolutely.
Lisa, I know you had some comments before, so I want to welcome you if you want to add those. And I also want to move on to our next question, which is talk to us about what the California Commission on Aging is going to be doing in these next 12 to 24 months around elder justice. What's getting you guys fired up?
Absolutely. Well, we get to tick mark off that this was included, that the creation of this council was, because that was a big priority for the commission, that it be embraced. So that's one. We got yes.
Okay.
We also a high priority for us was in the budget that there be money put in to provide additional training for the APS, for the public guardians, public conservators, public administrators, that we have well-resourced advocates. And so we're excited about that. A little discouraged that our, the funding request for our public guardians, public conservators, for the actual doing of the work just doesn't seem to be getting traction, but we will keep our eye on that. One of the big initiatives for the commission moving forward is workforce development. And you may say, well, how does workforce development dovetail with elder justice? And I would say it has to do with improving wages. It has to do with creating career ladders, greater opportunities for people to come into the industry. Gotta give props to Nicole's healthcare career pathway, helping people that might not be your traditional CNA applicant, bringing them on board, because we need to get a broader form of workforce. One of the things when we talk about elder justice, I don't really think caregivers wake up and think, okay, this is the morning I'm going to slap a patient or a resident or my mother. It is the gradual pressure that builds up because they are, in fact, living in poverty. When we look at our IHSS workers, they are paid so little, and money isn't even going into Social Security for them. So we are propagating these future generations of impoverishment. And so the elder justice, from the commission's perspective, has a lot to do with workforce development in this area. We're also focused on and excited about the CEJC's next rendition of the blueprint, and what is that going to identify, and are there going to be some specific regulatory fixes that the commission can weigh in on? So I would say broadly for elder justice, our big focus right now is workforce development and providing resources to folks. I'd also say, and Blanca talked about it before, the coordination of services. Our big push is for resourcing the IDTs, interdisciplinary teams. We know that some regions have these teams where it's bringing together the licensing, the law enforcement, the advocates, and it brings them to the table. But depending on your region, do you have funding to actually have an employee who's responsible for scheduling these meetings and doing the invitations? When it's based on volunteers, and there's so much turnover in staff in these different departments, that we'll see these programs, they get going, and then the key person gets promoted out, and then it just falls apart. So we're looking to how can we prioritize funding these. Maybe that's going to mean that we have to create a state level entity that then pushes down for regional. And regional means all areas of the state, not just the wealthier areas, not just the high density. It makes me sad to think that our older adults that live in rural areas don't necessarily get the benefit of these coordinated teams. And so that is a high priority for us, is to resource that. And along with that, so the IDTs, it's kind of the service advocates, it's how they come together to address cases.
Mhm.
But also, we need to be talking about the actual consumers, and I believe that is in
Mhm.
our adult ADRCs,
Mhm.
adult regional centers, because we don't have consistency across the state in these, and that's where the local person goes. That's where we are trying to train our consumers to go to
Mhm.
these central locations. Essentially, it's the no wrong door.
Mhm.
So both a priority for the commission as we're looking at elder justice is on
Mhm.
the restorative side with the IDTs, but also the more proactive. How do we get these services? Because again, I'm going to go back to my held belief that people are good and they
Mhm.
want to do the right thing, but they start feeling these pressures, and the
Mhm.
pressures then spill over into bad things. Now, I'm
Mhm.
not so naive as to say we don't actually have bad actors. We don't have people that really do look at these vulnerable populations and say, this is an
Mhm.
easy way to get over. And
Mhm.
to Blanca's point, we've got to do a better job of bringing in the law enforcement, the district attorneys that just, we've got to overcome some of the negative stereotypes that older adults or persons that have cognitive impairment, they don't make reliable witnesses.
Mhm.
Or
Mhm.
we don't want to re-traumatize these vulnerable individuals by bringing them to court.
Mhm.
That's very
Right.
old thinking. I want to use expletives, but I'll just be polite and just say that's diminutive. I think that's the word I'm looking for. That we are dismissing them, and that
Mhm.
they don't actually deserve their day in court. And so
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff's going on.
And I think, Lisa, I think that you're referencing something that I heard actually Dr. Mosqueda. And for those who work in this space, they know that she has been a pioneer around forensic, examination and helping to lead the way. And I think what helped me to understand that is exactly what you're saying, that there's sort of stages to elder abuse. And in the early stages, when we're very independent, you might see more of that financial abuse. But as things progress, that is when we see that kind of abuse you're talking about, when there is great stress and demand and lack of resources. And I think that's really the frame that I have come to see this terrible, instance of elder abuse. And I think you bring up a really good point. Thank you so much for that. I think that we sort of is saying, first of all, we've learned a couple things so far. And I think first is that we should all go play number 93 in the lottery, and hopefully that will be a lucky number, because that was number 93 in the master plan on aging. So thank you for that hot tip, everyone. If we just need a slight cut if you win. But I think what we also want to talk about is, we have these big lofty goals, but I'm wondering if, we can start with you, Blanca. Tell me what you think that victory would look like for the coordinating council in the next 12 months. And then Lisa, we'll have you jump in as well.
So I would say that the priority would be that we establish a no wrong door approach
Mm-hmm.
for how we're reporting
Mm-hmm.
elder and adults with disability abuse, and ensure that all the cases are being investigated and responded to.
Yeah.
I also think it's going to be critical because we have all of the experts now at the table. I think the biggest challenge in some of the work groups that I have seen with looking at the landscape
Mm-hmm.
and how we're currently doing things is we're going to need to let go of our territory
Ooh.
and allow for there needs to be a way to reduce the duplication and
Mm-hmm.
reduce the silos that have been established.
Mm-hmm.
So the goal has to be from the perspective of the person who is experiencing
Mm-hmm.
the abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that we are capable of doing this, but what it's going to require is that we have to be willing to have some transformational systemic changes in our institutions. And sometimes that means that we're going to have to combine maybe programs or departments that are currently housed in different agencies. And I see that as the priority, to begin to look at that no wrong door approach to how we not only receive the complaint, but then how we do it, how we investigate and adjudicate it.
Yeah.
Can I jump in? I think
Absolutely, yeah.
That slide, because Blanca's right about all the different entities that are in the sandbox. Earlier, Blanca, you mentioned about there was a subcommittee that's focusing on data, and one of the steps that we were looking at as that subcommittee was all of the different agencies that already have some jurisdiction in this world. And I gotta say, 12 years worth of experience, and I still was kind of surprised. There were more agencies in here that I really didn't think of in terms of their role with elder justice. And absolutely, I would echo Blanca's statement about silos. I don't think we have any intention of not playing well with others, but we have historical systems that can get in the way. And I'm going to tie back to what I started in the earlier. 2030 is just around the corner. We don't have time to pretend like we can start all over again. And I don't think we need to. I think we have a lot of great programs that are very capable and eager to do these things, but they need resources. You know, I think of the three of us share the Ombudsman program as being a great love. And that would be an example of a program that, you know, we don't need to get rid of it. We need to resource it. We need to make it available so that it has the ability to do more. And I love that. And I think the state is on board with that.
I would like to just add where you just mentioned, Lisa, about the resources. I think that's where we need to, and we have talked about this in some of the work groups, is let's look at what resources we can combine, because that's the other thing, is we can ask for more money on all of these different entities, but where are we really duplicating efforts and not using money as efficiently as we could? So how do we transform the current way that we are receiving elder abuse cases and investigating? That's really where it's going to have to start, and that's where we're going to have to be willing to say maybe all of these entities need to be under one agency, or all these. There's got to be, you know, a lead that coordinates that, because right now we're not coordinated.
Yeah.
So I do agree that yes, we always need more funding, but what are we doing with the money now, and how can we better utilize it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we go towards come towards the end of our conversation, if you could project yourself out, Lisa, I think you were right on to 2030. And you were, you know, sitting on a beach somewhere, reflecting back on the good work of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. What would you say? What would make you feel like, gosh, we are successful? If you could see, you know, what is that, 8 years out from now, how would you know that the Coordinating Council has been successful?
Okay. I would say two parts. One is greater engagement by the general population, the general public. There's the opportunity for people who are experiencing this to put their input in. I don't think that we can look to our elected officials and say, we expect you to fix everything, when the elected officials, by and large, are not older adults. They're not adults with disabilities. They, by and large, come from education, some amount of wealth or influence. And so it can't be all on them. It has to be a part of the community. And so that takes work. That takes people actually signing up to sit and listen to these meetings, to attend if it's possible in person, but at the very least to be listening in and sending in public comments. I think we have kind of a obligation as citizens to do that. So that would be my thing of, have we done enough to bring this conversation to the public so that they know this is important? And I guess also just kind of broadly, I've had a couple of experiences that I think have colored the way I look at elder justice. And bear with me, you may not get my story at first, but a few years ago, my youngest son in college got that phone call from Microsoft that his laptop was in danger, and just, give us access to your debit card and we can fix your computer. And so, $500 later, they are moving things around on his laptop. And to this day, he swears that they made his computer better. And there was a sense of urgency for him because he was working on a paper that was probably due that day. So, he's telling me about this story. And I was thinking about, as a parent, what is my reaction? And then I was also thinking in the moment, if my mother called me and my mother said that she had just, spent $500 with Microsoft to have them do this on her computer, would my reaction have been the same? Would I have been more inclined to say, you know what, Mom, I think maybe you aren't responsible with your finances anymore, that you are susceptible to being conned? Whereas I didn't place that judgment on my 22-year-old. Another happened recently with my father, and his reluctance to utilize behavioral health services because he didn't want to open the door to there being any implication that he is not 100% competent. Because I'm pretty sure my dad's thinking, if I admit that I need these helps, then my daughter's going to come in and she's going to take away the keys to my car and she's going to take away my checkbook. And, Nicole knows me. She knows my dad. I might do that, but no, I wouldn't. My point is, we have to create an environment in which people feel safe to share that this has happened to them, and that we don't have these knee-jerk reactions to fix them, to infantize them, and to take away their autonomy just because they have in fact been scammed or abused.
Yeah, good point. So Blanca, for Lisa, she sees success as deep community engagement and awareness and informed electorate and electeds. If you were sitting on a beach in 2030 and you were like, gosh, looking back on your time at the coordinating council, how would you define success?
I would define it as having a no wrong door approach to elder justice, whether that's one toll-free number, regardless of where you live, you can contact this number. Today we have 911, and that's one place that people call for help. The elder justice is just as important. And the other thing I would want to see in 10 years or 2030 would be that we have even changed the fact that we have to bring all of these groups together in order to coordinate our efforts, that then there would be a very seamless effort on the part of the consumer. So we're the ones that are going to need to do the heavy lifting and figure this out, but that no wrong door and having complete access, and that there is an awareness, just like now we're starting to remove the stigma of mental health. Let's remove that stigma around elder abuse so that anybody is talking about it. We know what the warning signs are. Even acknowledging that we do need to be better trained across all healthcare systems on what those signs are.
Mm-hmm.
That include the LGBTQ community, tribal communities, and all these diverse groups that 2030, it's not just more people are older. That 2030 includes one of the most diverse populations in the country. So that public awareness needs to be culturally, linguistically sensitive so that we're using the language that will make sense to the individual who is experiencing something that they may not have even identified as being abuse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. So we have come to the end of our time together, and I want to take a moment to thank both Blanca and Lisa, but also Marty, who was unable to join us. And I also want to say thank you to the partnership with Department of Social Services. We have our ASL interpreter here today. Thank you for all of your hard work over the last 2 years on our behalf. And I also want to say we have Maria Kalina and her team who have worked behind the scenes for 2 years to make us look really good when we are pretty technically inept. So to Maria and Nancy, I thank you. I also would just add that many of you know that I am going to be leaving Empowered Aging and moving on to some other challenges and adventures in my life. And so this is probably going to be the last time you are going to see me on the Lunch and Learn for a while. But if you stick around tomorrow, I'll have some exciting announcements coming. And I'm sure Empowered Aging will come back with more awesome educational programming. So they're going to take the summer to regroup, and then you may see more options. And Walter had to make his appearance on the last Lunch and Learn.
That's a great way to end, Nicole.
It's true. So with that, I say thank you so much. I appreciate all of you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.